Writing about comedy is hard, especially when that piece of writing is attempting to dissect and understand the greatness behind a specific piece of comedy. Sometimes something just makes you laugh because it's funny. I've always wanted to make a video on people like Tim Robinson, John Mulaney, Eric Andre, because they truly do have a specific approach to their craft that is worth dissecting. But I also don't know how to explain it without sounding like a pretentious douchebag, not to imply that I'm not that already. But there's one piece of comedy that has really never left my mind, a piece of comedy not enough people talk about, a piece of comedy that in my opinion has shaped the comedic landscape of the last few years, and that piece of comedy is the SNL digital short Dear Sister. Do I even need to introduce this thing? Before becoming what is, in my opinion, one of the most influential pieces of comedy of the 21st century, Dear Sister started as a viral, universally loved digital short on SNL. It starred Andy Samberg, Bill Hader, Shia LaBeouf, and more. If you somehow don't know what it is, it's a 4-minute short film where one person shoots another person, and another person shoots another person, and you get the gist. But boiled down, it's a parody of a scene from The OC that utilizes the song Hide and Seek by Imogen Heap as the punchline. It premiered in 2007 when SNL was still relatively new to the digital short segment, and it had quite the impact. One major thing to take into consideration is that release year, 2007, a year that is pretty critical in regards to this short's success. This was the year YouTube became a thing. Much of what made Dear Sister such a hit was how easy it was to share. I mean, if you look at some of the other viral videos from that time, this thing lines up as being a simple concept comedy short using an internet reference as a gag. It's that lo-fi aesthetic of the short that makes it so appealing compared to most of the shorts you see on SNL today. Akiva Schaffer, a member of The Lonely Island and ex-writer for SNL, sums it up in a Huffington Post article when he said, "So it was definitely a last-minute short, and the reason it looks like it does is because that's just a hotel suite. When it gets to be Friday night and you haven't figured it out, then the only thing you can do is rent a hotel suite, grab some lights, and film in there. And so that's what it is, just a hotel room and some lights." Because of this simplicity, people replicated it. There were countless remakes on YouTube to different TV scenes poking fun at the same trope. The very fact that the short was so influential led to controversy, as its popularity happened around the same time as the Virginia Tech shootings. Fans of the short continued to replicate and worship it amidst the tragedy, leading to a negative piece regarding the short from New York Times writer Noam Cohen. But I don't see any of this as a true reason for why this short nowadays is looked at as such an important piece of media. I think the main reason it's something I look back at and appreciate is the fact that it feels ahead of its time. For 2007, this feels like something you'd see on Adult Swim in 2015. While many achieved the same, no comedic short captured what was one of the first representations of millennial comedy the way Dear Sister did. While Cohen's central issue with the short was its influence, it's safe to say based on the article that Cohen is one example out of the thousands of older viewers who don't necessarily understand the appeal of this short. But as someone who does clearly appreciate it, I don't blame them. Much of the appeal of quote-unquote millennial comedy is the lack of understanding that comes with consuming it. This short fits within the same brand as something like Eric Andre, Tim and Eric, certain episodes of Rick and Morty, and a lot of the humor you'd find on the internet. It's humor not meant to be discussed or understood, it's just funny because it's funny. So rather than trying to understand something that's not meant to be understood, it's a better use of time to understand why rather than how Dear Sister is that first piece of millennial comedy. But to understand that, you really have to understand what millennial comedy is. Rachel Rosd, a writer for The Guardian, puts it nicely in this article that tackles the subject when she writes, "One explanation for all this unrealism is that it's a response to a world that has stopped making sense. Philosophical absurdism argues that the universe is inherently irrational, a perspective rendered particularly apt by the unpredictable political developments of the past few years." I really love that approach, and to piggyback off of it, I think this style of comedy not only questions meaning, but it also questions necessity. The digital age, in my opinion, has brought in a sense of excess. Streaming services, online shopping, even pornography. Dear Sister came at a time where this rise of accessibility had its start. Having now grown into the norm, I think this newfound access has a lot to do with how society views humor. With access to pleasure at your fingertips, this lifestyle has questioned what gives us fulfillment. Much of the unknown is now known thanks to an excess of content, and with something as low stakes as the internet, humor is a part of that excess. The concept that anyone can share a piece of art is funny in itself. A guy microwaving bread to nobody isn't that funny, but somehow putting it on YouTube adds to the joke. The fact that that is the entirety of the joke is the joke itself. This newfound access questions the necessity of the traditional punchline. When it costs nothing, you're able to produce comedy that's funny because of its existence rather than that punchline. This is why Dear Sister feels like not only a creative piece of traditional comedy, but a significant part of this new trend. It has a punchline, but half the joke isn't the actual punchline. It's the repetition. It's that lack of conclusion, something the writers were completely aware of when putting it together. That's the joke. In an article from the Washington Post addressing the same subject, Elizabeth Brunig writes, "Rather than trying to restore meaning and sense where they've gone missing, the style aims to play with the moods and emotions of an illegible world. In a way, it's a digital update to the surreal and absurd genres of art and literature that characterized the tumultuous early 20th century. Dear Sister updates this genre by making comedy itself a victim of the joke. Even comedies from the 80s like The Naked Gun and Airplane have punchlines and embrace slapstick more than they do parody. You still get those repetitive, over-the-top gags that are just as funny, but at the end of the day, these are structured jokes compared to this. What I'm saying is this lack of a structure, of thought, of a concrete punchline, that is the short making fun of comedy. The pleasure comes from not only this clever approach to humor, but from this rejection of traditional comedic norms, especially in the entertainment industry where creativity needs to be pushed through so many doors before seeing an audience. It's no wonder someone like Filthy Frank, someone who defined more of the last decade than most would like to admit, also references this short in one of his albums. That character is also in a sense a poster child for this new wave of comedy. It's attempting to achieve the same thing by saying things on the internet, creating things on the internet because he can. The punchline is simply the existence. It's a little dramatic to call a 4-minute short with barely any plot one of the most influential pieces of comedy of the last 20 years. But then again, it's those characteristics that makes this short just that defines what it means to create in the digital age. The bigger it gets, the funnier the very existence of this short becomes. To attempt to understand something not meant to be understood seems silly and contradictory, but with the rapid speed at which content is being produced and consumed today, it's worth slowing down and appreciating those works that make a difference. So with all that being said, thanks for watching. Check out this short and form your own opinion, and I'll see you.